The increasing cost of net wrap and baler twine leads to talk of big old haystacks. The Farm Dog of the Year competition. John Deere 55, 95, and 105 combines, and the 100 series of Farmall tractors. All that's coming up on this week's edition of the Rural Reflections Podcast. Welcome to the Rural Reflections Podcast. It's Dave Nelson in Carrington, North Dakota, co-hosting, and Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio, also on co-host duties. Dave, it was dry last week. Has it gotten any better out in North Dakota?
No better, but I did see something on the 10-day forecast today now. So I believe it was April 6th. They're forecasting thunderstorms for here. So I've kept on predicting all winter that we're going to get our rain. It's going to be in April, which it looks like it might be a chance for it anyway, because we had so much fog in the end of January. And, you know, they all say 90 days from a fog, or we had lots of frost and stuff. 90 days from that, you're going to be getting moisture. So I'm counting on the old-timers to come through on this one, and we're going to get some rain first part of April.
Well, that'd be all right. That'd be just fine here. We've had about 700 this past week, which is about 2 or 3 heavy dews worth is all it's really been so far. So it's pretty dry here also. And just so everybody knows, this is our coffee talk portion. This is basically what you hear at the cafe. And right now, people are talking about how doggone dry it is. This week, Dave, a freighter got stuck sideways in the Suez Canal, and that's slowing down a lot of shipments going on right now. Of course, we've had shipment problems before. And I've heard recently that twine and net wrap, for those people out there who bale hay and alfalfa, has gone up incredibly. Shipping outrageous. Shipping rates double, triple, even quadruple in some areas. The added cost of these materials, combined with increased cost to ship things, is causing prices to skyrocket. Even the items made from plastics like bale wrap are seeing climbing prices due to tighter supplies of polymer-based items. So I was thinking about this, Dave. It's an opportunity for us to talk about hay bucks and stackers. And before we even get to that, I was even thinking about myself. You know, I've tried a lot of different ways of feeding cattle. And one way was stockpiled forage. And basically, it's a fancy term for just basically going out and cutting your hay and raking it all together in very large piles, as big as you can, and just leaving it there. And then come fall and into the winter, you just cross fence over the rows, and you put about a day's worth out so the cattle have a day's worth of food. So they clean it all up, and then you go out and you move the fence again the next day. And it's actually a pretty nice way to do it. Even when there's snow on top of it, it works out pretty well because that snow just acts like a big old refrigerator. But an even more enjoyable thing, and I say that with a wink and a nod, would be to buck hay. Now, that's another thing that people used to do way back when, and it probably, from a nostalgic point of view, sounds pretty good, but the actual act of bucking hay, it's not as efficient as we're used to with round balers, is it, Dave?
No, round bales are probably, it's just, without a doubt, the most efficient way of handling a lot of hay. The square bales are good too, but a lot more specialized, a lot harder for a average farmer to come up with a reason to own one of those big square balers, because they're not as easy to feed, and it's just round bale is where it's at, I think, for the cattle world.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. We talked about hay stackers a few weeks ago, and I had a hay stacker, a Heston 30, I believe. And that was nice, and it made nice hay, and it was pretty cheap, and you could do everything on your own. But as far as efficiency, Even if you put the haystacks indoors at all, you were wasting a whole bunch of space because everywhere from probably about 7 feet on up within the hay shelter was unused because you couldn't lift another stack up on top of there. Feeding them was, I would have to say, a bit harder. Even with a good grapple, it was a little bit harder. It's hard to beat those round bales, and really, most of those round balers, they're pretty good at working out on the field too. It's not like you have to stop and repair very often.
No, the round baler has, just in the time that I've been in the ag business, come a long way. I mean, we had some of those first round balers that you just couldn't hardly make them start a bale.
Yeah.
And we even had something called a Hawk-built baler that basically just rolled up a pile of hay on the ground, and you just had to drive over it and let it sit there. It was sort of round, but, all of that was it was just a learning experience in getting round hay or round bales started. I have experience with bucking hay, but not the struggle that they used to have with the old hay buckers that would only lift about a foot off the ground and put the hay into an overshot stacker. I actually ran a farmhand loader, and Dad and I built haystacks, built a lot of haystacks, a lot of straw stacks and that with that. But that had its issues too. You had to move the stacks in the fall and get those into your yard or spend hours pushing snow to get to them out in the fields in the wintertime. But we used to bring them in the yard anyway. And that was, the easiest probably way of bucking hay. But when the round baler finally was, perfected and did a good job, that's the way to go.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I noticed this week that farmers are invited to submit nominations for the 2022 Farm Bureau Farm Dog of the Year contest. That's supported by Purina. Fourth year of the contest, $5,000 in prize money. You can nominate your dog through the Farm Bureau now. You and I have known a lot of farm dogs in our time, but you told me before we got on the air that your daughter Sarah almost had a dog. Now, bear in mind, Sarah's a big-time cat person, everybody, that Sarah almost found herself a little puppy yesterday. Well, not so little either. Tell us a little bit about that, would you, Dave?
Yeah, well, she was going home, and there was a yellow lab that was trying to get into any vehicle that went by him on the road, and she couldn't take it, so she stopped for him, and he got right in. And then she took him home and put his face out on the Facebook rummage sale and some other local things on Facebook, hoping to find the owner, and nobody called, and she was quite sure she was going to be a dog owner. She started clearing out a place in her garage for the dog because the dog couldn't be in the house or in their shop because those are full of cats. So about the time she was getting it all ready and in bed and trying to find some food and that, they found the owner on Facebook, or not the owner, the people that were babysitting for the dog for the owner. And so later on last night, about 8, 9 o'clock, she took the dog home to where it was supposed to be. But it was just a nice dog, and you know how those golden labs are. They're just friendly and sweet dog. And she was pretty sure she was going to be a dog owner until the owners called.
I can just imagine her cats going, oh no, this is not going to work. And them getting on the internet and going, okay, we got to search this out right away and figure this out. Get a hold of this dog's owner and get him over here as soon as possible. Dave, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. We're going to talk about combines, old combines, coming up in just a little bit right here on the Rural Reflections podcast. Welcome back to the Rural Reflections Podcast. You've got Dave Nelson out in Carrington, North Dakota. Grant Nelson here in Thief River Falls at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. Dave, we've got it pretty well covered from west to east here. Let's start talking about old iron. That's a thing that you and I both like an awful lot, and we both grew up with John Deere combines. Now, you're a Case IH guy, but you do have a history with John Deere combines, the 55, 95. We never had a 105, though. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe the relationship between the 55, 95, and the 105, Dave?
Well, they were a new version of the combine, the first real generally usable combines, self-propels that John Deere had. And then they advanced, into a round back and a square back and that. So eventually they had to get a big one. That's when the 105 came around. And that one would have been a 50-inch cylinder because there was 50-inch cylinders out there to compete with. So it was a pretty good combine, not probably quite as popular as the 95, but there was quite a good number of them before they switched over into the 7700s, 6600s, 7700s.
I remember all those good old pictures of people out combining, and they were usually just covered with dust. I remember picture of you one time, and you were absolutely covered with dust because a lot of those old combines, they didn't have a cab.
Yeah, we didn't ever. Well, I guess we did eventually. The 195 had a cab. That one I didn't get to use much, but the 55, that was just open, and so were the old Massey's and stuff that, we had around there. But it would have been nice to have a cab, but we didn't know any better, so you just sat there and let it pile up on you, and then when you turned around and the wind was the other way, you shook it off and enjoyed half of a round anyway.
Yeah, I remember that, and I remember when you got a big slug in there, sometimes you'd plug up the combine, and you had to get in there with a big breaker bar and go on the end of the shaft that led into the combine itself and back it up by hand, just brute force to get that slug out of there. Nowadays, it seems like they've got pretty good systems for getting the slugs out, don't they?
Yeah, well, our combines have hydraulic reversing for the cylinder and the entire the front of the combine, so you can back it right on out, right back to the sickle if you want to. And it actually works. It's really a nice thing. It's actually set up so that it's computer programmed, so it bumps the cylinder or the rotor, just gives it a whole bunch of bumps to gradually move it out, and then you can speed it up and push it backwards even faster. So yeah, we've come an awful long way, but it costs an awful lot of money to get to there too.
I always think a combine is kind of a process or a manufacturing facility on wheels. You have to have a lot of product go through there over a period of time to make it make sense, and it's almost as complex as a factory.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going into combining that is really advanced now. Just about every combine we put out has full automation on it, so it actually adjusts itself up and down the field based on conditions. If it gets drier, it changes settings on sieves and the concaves and even the vanes that guide the crop through the rotor cage. So it's gotten crazy, but I didn't think people would like that. I thought they'd be leery of that, and everybody wants it. And the big reason is it works. So you could put your 78-year-old dad in there, and he doesn't have to be setting it. It's probably just going to set itself if you get it set right one time,
Well, that sounds pretty relaxing, Dave. I used to find some relaxation baling hay, and that was on a 300 International Farmall tractor. And those are another type of machinery that we have a lot in common with. Can you talk a little bit about the 300 and the 400 and the 450 and maybe where they came from?
Well, they all started at the M&H, which started as a I suppose an F12 and an F20.
Yeah.
But the 100 series was a big advancement over the M's and H's. A lot more styling to them. They had 2-point hitch, similar to 3-point hitch, live hydraulics, live PTO, and they were just a much modernized version of M's and H's. I like that 300. I can still hear those every plunge of the baler, that governor open up on that, and that little motor just rip and try and keep going, you know. And they were powerful, good pull-ins, 3-bottom tractor. And the 450 was like an M with more horsepower. That was a 4-bottom plow tractor. And they were just there wasn't anything like them at the time. You know, they were styled, they were nimble, they were lot newer technology put into them than what had been out there, and just a great tractor, I thought.
I agree with you. You know, the one thing that comes to my mind when I think of the 300 that we had back on the farm was athletic. It seemed like a really athletic tractor. I mean, particularly when you look at going from the M to that, just a whole different deal. And more comfortable, a nice control station, a good power, like you say. And I mean, I enjoyed myself baling hay on that. That was actually a tractor that was, I felt it was kind of friendly. You know, you had the power steering on the 300, the one that we used on the baler tractor had power steering, and it was just really a kind of a treat to drive that. It was, I didn't feel real beat up at the end of the day. Of course, I was 15, you know, but at the same time, it was a tractor that's pretty easy on you.
Yeah, I had to say I always picked the 300 when it was time to go plowing, even though the M would do a little bit better job with a 3-bottom plow. I'd take the 300. I liked it because our M was narrow front, you know,
yeah,
and that was a little more difficult to plow with, and just a little. Now that M with the narrow front was kind of scary to drive, because if you hit a bump with that thing, most likely the steering wheel was going to go spinning out of your hands, and you were going to end up getting a bump on your knuckles from the steering knob.
Yeah, you're going to get a receipt from the steering knob. I think that's what they call it in professional wrestling, a receipt. Dave, you got anything else for us this week? It's been a blast talking to you, but you know, our time, it seems like we run out of time before we run out of subjects.
Well, I guess until next week, we'll see ya.
All right, that sounds good. There he is, my brother Dave Nelson out in Carrington, North Dakota. I'm Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio, and this has been the Rural Reflections Podcast.